Well, welcome to Touched by Grace. I'm here with some dear old friends, Val and Francine Dietrich, and going to ask them about how the Lord touched their hearts and their lives with His grace. And why don't you tell me a little bit about growing up here in eastern Idaho, first Val, and then we'll let Francine. What was family and what life look like for Val Dietrich?
Well, my folks were kind of on the farmer's side, and they had a dairy, and then they sold the dairy and went into real estate. And I kind of grew up in the real estate business and insurance business in Rexburg, Idaho. And my father was not an active person at the time. He was a person that belonged to Lions Club, and Lions Club was considered the wild bunch in Rexburg, and the Rotarians were figured the religious people, and the Kiwanis were the college people. So that was the three people. But my father was a realtor and an insurance man, and I grew up, and they were good. They did go to church, but not really very much until about 1954. And one of his friends was a bishop and wanted him to become a secretary. And my father was very good with numbers, and so that's where he started into church really strong. He became a secretary to a bishop. But that was about as far as he went. And he stayed an elder, and then he did go to the temple and took me to the temple with him. And I was sealed to them at that time. But it was a long time ago that was a process that they went through. That, and then after that, we lived next door to the 4th Ward and across the street from the college, so we were supposed to go, and people thought we were all Mormons, and so we were expected, and that's where basically I grew up.
And did you grow up in Rexburg?
No, I grew up in St. Anthony.
Okay.
And my family was Mormon. Mm-hmm. My parents weren't as strong as some of them. My mother and father were married in the temple in Salt Lake. But then he just didn't want to go to church or anything. He didn't wear his garments anymore. He just didn't want to bother with it. Uh-huh. And but my mother made sure that I got to church. She'd take me once in a while to church too, Mm-hmm. And all my aunts and uncles, everybody Mormon. There's only 4 of us out of the whole Taylor family that are not Mormon, and I've got brothers and sisters. It's our little family that received Jesus. Mm-hmm. And my little brother became a born-again Christian, and he'd keep talking to me and say, I want to talk to you about Jesus. Because I should really start out about how I ended up going to the temple first to get married. And then later, he's the one that told me about Jesus, and I was saved. Mm-hmm. But I met Val, and we went into the temple, and we're married.
And so that's normal life for our culture here in eastern Idaho, is to have a LDS background, get married in the temple, and get your temple recommend and those things. Mm-hmm. And so you were sharing with me earlier that you came to Christ in 1990. Mm-hmm. So you and Val had been married for quite a long time before you came to the Lord. Were you guys active in your ward up to that point?
Very.
Very active, okay.
Yeah. Well, I was, a teacher in just about all the organizations that they allow women. Mm-hmm. I ended up to being in the Relief Society presidency, mm-hmm. and their spiritual leader, and I really believed it, mm-hmm. That it was true, but I still had a little question mark. Mm-hmm. I think for a long time. I remember when I was a child, probably about junior in high school, and I went to church, and I got there a little early, and I was sitting there looking at the wall, and all the way around the walls were pictures of the presidents of the church. And I thought, Where's Jesus? You know? And so I kind of had a question then at one time. But then I went to the LDS seminary, you know, and got involved and thought, oh, well, it's just me, you know, it's just me. Of course, this is true. And,
so then your little brother began to share with you, and how did he moved out of the area, or was he still?
he was in St. Anthony.
Okay, so he stayed in St. Anthony, and you're over in Rexburg with Val, and so he started sharing with you, not right at 1990, was it a...
It was before he tried to talk to me.
I see. Yeah.
And I was kind of having a problem at church. They'd taken me out of the relief side. They move you around all the time and put me into a young women's teacher, and they were little stinkers. And after a few times, I just went to the relief, or the president of the mutual right there in our ward, and said, I won't be back. I says, I can't handle this. And usually the bishop calls you right in to give you another job. Well, he didn't. And then shortly after that, I heard they're changing the temple ceremony. And I thought, well, why are they doing that? Did God not do it right to start with? Even though when I went to the temple, I thought, very strange God we have. I really did, because the things in there were so strange. I thought, this is weird, you know?
Tell me about that. What was the strangest thing about it, or the awkward thing about it, or?
It's just different. God, their God is so different from our God. You know, some of the things they had you doing in the temple.
The secret handshakes, through
yeah,
the
all
veil,
that. All of that was very strange.
And you have a guide that can lead you through. A lot of people will have a close family member or whoever's available. Did you have somebody
Well, it
that
was,
you knew, or?
you know what, when you get married in the temple, you know, when you get married, it's supposed to be a beautiful thing. And you have your family and friends there, and walk down the aisle, and it's such a beautiful thing. Well, in there, I had nobody with me, because my parents didn't have recommends. His parents were with us, and then they had another couple with us for witnesses. And so his mother kind of led me through a little bit, and his dad him a little bit. But they have other people that are working there that, you know, kind of help you with all that. And
It's just weird.
just weird.
Did it seem normal to you, Val, or you didn't think much of it? Or tell me what were your thoughts were when you were going through it?
It kind of scared me.
Did it?
Because I was not I didn't feel comfortable there. And after I went through all their procedures and all their special, things that they did in there, I thought to myself, I don't belong here. I mean, I was very uncomfortable, and I didn't feel like it was something that I wanted to do again. And we did not go to the temple for quite a while, and then we had some friends that we got into, and they led us into the temple a couple times, and they were going to save us, and get us back going to the temple. But I felt very uncomfortable with the temple and the procedures and what you say in the temple. It was very uncomfortable for me.
So you didn't go back and do a lot of temple work then?
Very little.
Okay.
I just didn't. Back to my brother, and after I had heard they were changing the temple ceremony, they took a lot of the penalties out, and that part about the preacher being brought in and Lucifer,
right,
they had taken that out. And of course I didn't know exactly what they had done to change, but they had changed it, Now I don't know, I feel like God was really kind of working with me a little bit, where I wasn't going back. I was getting different feelings. And then my brother called me one day and said, okay, Francine, we're going to go to Idle Falls and have lunch. I want to tell you about Jesus. I said, okay. So we came up, parked his car in my driveway, and I said, we'll go in my car. I drove, and we weren't out of the driveway before his Bible was open. And he just, really, he told me who God was, and what salvation is, and Then he got into the book, or told me about the Book of Mormon, how wrong it was, and Joseph Smith was a fraud, and everything. Well, we came down and had lunch, and
what was your initial reaction? Were you, don't talk to me this way, or were you open?
I was open.
Oh, you were open.
Mm-hmm. And when he brought me home about 5 o'clock in the afternoon, he looked at me and he says, "I've confused you, haven't I?" He says, "I did too much, didn't I?" And I said, "Yeah." I says, "I'm going to have to think about this." So he told me to read certain parts of the Bible, like John and Romans. And then he handed me a little book called God's Word, Final, Infallible, and Forever. He said, "This is what saved me." He said, "Somebody left it on my porch." And I got it and just threw it in the house somewhere. And one day I found it. And I thought, well, I'm going to read through this. My brother wasn't an active Mormon anyway. So he studied that, and he left it with me, and I read it. And it took me about 6 months. And I mean, my kids laugh about coming home and seeing me in a chair, still in my nightgown, reading, you know, trying to get all this figured out. And there wasn't all this stuff to find then as there is now.
Right.
I mean, there's
all the resources and the websites.
I know, everything. Back then there wasn't much, you know.
What was this doing to Val when you were in this research mode? Val, how were you feeling? Very uncomfortable with her?
No, I felt rejected, I mean, all kinds of things, because when I married her, I did it on a selfish situation, because I wanted her for time and all eternity. I'm selfish in that way, you know, that I was going to have her for time and all eternity, nobody else. And so
he loves you. He loves you.
But it really bothered me, because I felt like that I had lost her, you know, and that there was it was bad for me, because I felt like I was on the outside. It took 8 years approximately for her to bring me into the church, because I was downtown Rexburg, a Mormon businessman, and my business was probably 99% LDS people, and it was awful hard for me to go with her, and it was even harder to see her go to church someplace else. And I had quite an experience when this happened, because I was going to our ward in the Burton area, and if everybody, as you talked about leprosy last night, I felt like I had leprosy, because nobody would sit by me. There was one old guy, 80 years old, that still liked me and was going to try and save me, but he was the only one that would sit with me. And I went about 4 or 5 times, and after being kind of ostracized and don't talk to me, and you know, sitting alone, and there's 50 to 100 people around you, and nobody talks to you, and then people at the grocery store kind of avoid you, and my business went from #1 real estate salesman to 0, because I wasn't sitting on the front row. I wasn't getting the Relief Society referrals, and that was quite a bit, because everybody knows what's going on in the Relief Society and coming and going, and I had an awfully good business in the real estate and insurance, and I decided that one day I wasn't going to do this, so I sold my insurance business and just went strictly real estate. And since Rexburg had kind of turned me down, it was kind of a strange thing to me, because I started getting calls from people that needed assistance in buying real estate, and lo and behold, they were all Christian. And so I came down here to Idaho Falls, and I don't know how many houses I sold. But,
God was with us.
And so I kind of ended up at, she went to about 4 or 5 different churches, and I went with her. After a while, I started going with her, but we ended up at Christ Community Church, and was accepted there. And lo and behold, I had 4 or 5 sales in real estate, and they were big sales, so they were the ones that would tide us over for a little while. But we went through it one time where we sold all our toys and playthings to put groceries on the table. I sold cars and snow machines and guns, because there was no business out there. So,
Yeah.
but the Lord has taken care of us and blessed us with health and also with good friends, and we seem to be doing fine.
But it took about 8 years so if you gave your heart to the Lord in 1990, and then about 98, because I remember in the early days when you were coming to Calvary Chapel, the two of you, before you got plugged into Christ Community, and it was pretty obvious that you had surrendered to the Lord, and Val was tagging along with you because he loved you, but not necessarily because he was excited about the Lord.
That's true.
And so, tell me, you shared with me a long time ago, Val, you had a conversation when the word was out that Francine had given her life to Jesus and was a born-again Christian and had left the LDS church. You had a visit from the leadership of the church. They came down.
No, I didn't have a visit. I went to them.
Oh, you went to
I
them.
went right
Okay.
to the church, and because I didn't know what to do. I mean,
So this would be your bishop, or
well,
who'd you go to?
no, he was the stake president.
Okay.
And he was a friend from childhood up, and a neighbor. He just lived up the street a ways. And I sat in there and I went into him and asked his counsel, because I did not know what to do. I mean, and he basically pointed his finger right at my nose and said, "Divorce her." Well, I was taken back by that. And because I was very possessive, I wasn't going to divorce her. I got 2 kids, and I
4 kids, dear.
well, 4 kids, but 2 kids up in that area at the time.
Oh, that was when we lived in another house up on the hill.
But anyway, I was taken back that he would be so strict with that. He didn't look at me and talk to me or put his arm around me and said, "Let's talk about it." He just put when I said what it was, the problem was going on, he basically said that, you're not compatible, you should divorce her immediately.
And that just really rocked you back on your heels to get that kind of counsel. And I know how much you love Francine, so it's probably some of the stiffest counsel that could come your direction.
It brought a lot of questions. And then one day, Francine and I decided to go to Salt Lake. And she was going to prove a point. And I have a fast car, and we were there quick, and I was going to prove my point. And we walked in that temple grounds down there, and walked up there, and across the door is the all-seeing eye and the Mason handshake. Well, I went over and knocked on the first little black tag I could find and said, "Hey, I've been a Mormon for 50 years, and I've never really ever paid attention. What is that handshake? And what's this all-seeing eye? And by the way, what's all these markings on the temple?" I mean, I was asking some real deep questions. And I did this twice to different people. Basically got the same answer that said that's basically just architecture, and it's just for the good of, And I said, "Well, isn't that the Mason handshake?" And they said, "Oh, that's a friendship handshake, and I'll see an eye is God is watching over you, And then we looked it up and found out that basically it means something else.
Yeah. And so that also just continued to perpetuate the questions you had, because Francine was trying to prove points, and you guys are going back and forth and driving your fast car around to figure out how to get that done.
So I was taken back, and so I started doing a little studying, and with her help, we've gone through quite a few trials. But she's helped me through this, and she got me into where I started to want to learn, and not just go by what I was told, because that's what I'd done all my life. I was told that I was going to do this. I was told I was going to do that. But another thing that probably brought a little problem to my life was when I went in to be advanced in the priesthood. And I was an elder in the priesthood, and I had held several positions, and I was a teacher of the elders quorum, and I got into trouble one day. There's some different kids in our ward, and so I took all the kids to JB's for breakfast, for priesthood meeting. And I've never seen kids eat like that, and there was a couple kids that had never been in a restaurant. I mean, they'd never really spent a lot of time, and so they probably cleaned. That was the worst day for JB's because there was about well, it was my Suburban. There was 10 of us, and they about cleaned old JB's out. And I got in real trouble, but I told them, I said, I had another advisor there with me, and we gave a message on the way back from the JB's, but I still got chastised for that.
What would you be in trouble for that?
You're not ever supposed to take them off the
property.
Well, another thing, they're so caught up in works and things that they're not supposed to do, all their laws and ordinances, you know. And on Sunday, you don't go to a restaurant.
Oh, this is
on
a Sunday.
You don't put anybody to work.
Right.
You know, when I read about the Pharisees in the Bible, I think of the Mormons. Really, because they have a lot of that Old Testament stuff going on.
Yeah. So
but back to this Abronic priesthood thing, I wanted to belong to, I wanted to go up because all my friends had transferred and progressed up to the high priest. And I wanted to, and I really wanted to, at one time I told Francine I would like to, you know, kind of be a bishop, you know, and I was kind of, all my friends were becoming bishops.
Sure.
And doing things, and I was kind of left behind. And I went into the bishop, and I passed all of the questions he asked, you know, and there was a bunch of them, and they were kind of personal. And he got back, he said, "Do you pay a full tithing?" And I looked at him, I said, "No." And he slammed that book in my face, I mean, clunk, and left. I mean, I'm sitting there at the table, and he's gone. I mean, but they had a secretary that was there, and he come over there. He could see I was distraught, and I'm still sitting there. And I got up and went to walk out. And he put his arm around me. He said, "Val, you were one of the highest tithe payers in the Burton Ward last year, but I told the truth. You know, either a net payer or you're a gross payer. And you know, where are you?" But I paid what I thought I should, but I couldn't say that I paid 100%, you know. And that hurt me pretty bad. So I never did get promoted, and I could see all my friends going, and that bothered me. In fact, I even got relieved of my position as of the elders quorum teacher.
As a result of that meeting, or just?
Well, it was kind of ironic that I would all of a sudden kind of not be needed.
Right.
And that's where I kind of stepped away and started thinking, well, gosh, you know. And I'd been to temple for quite a while. But I did have we had a temple recommend.
Oh yeah, we did. We always had our temple recommend, but we didn't like going there.
So all of that, and then when you came to the Lord in 98 or around there, Val, how does this affect your kids? Because your kids are all grown and things.
Well, we had two that weren't grown yet
Okay.
when I, left the Mormon church.
In 1990.
In 1990, we had two children, two daughters at home.
Okay.
And it didn't affect them any. And the others don't, I'm sure they were upset with us, but they didn't say too much. And Megan is a born-again Christian. And I think Katrina is. I'm hoping she is. But our two eldest kids are staunch Mormon.
They go on missions, and
our son went on a mission.
And we sent him on a mission, and we were believers at the time when we sent him that he should go do this. And it was kind of a funny thing. He was in constant pain, his total mission. and he had something wrong with his shoulder and his back.
Well, he had that frozen shoulder. Have you ever heard of a frozen shoulder?
No,
Oh, I had one once. It was horrible. And I finally went to a chiropractor that massaged it out. He lived on, when he went on his mission, he had a bottle of Motrin that big. And he was living on Motrin.
He was an 18-month mission. And when he got back, he said he just couldn't take the pain anymore. And so we took him up to this chiropractor, and he had that pain gone in a couple sessions. And he spent 18 months within pain. But
So 2 of your kids are faithful Mormons.
Well, Megan is.
Oh.
And Katrina, I'm not sure. She lives in Arizona. I don't know.
So 2 of your kids are committed to the LDS church, yes. The 2 oldest.
The 2 oldest.
And then your 2 youngest ones, Megan saved, and then your other daughter, and then the grandkids and those things. And so if you could describe this is life before you received Jesus, Val, and then life in Jesus, how would you describe the difference of those 2 things? How would you describe the peace that you have, or the assurance you have, or how could you put that into words, Val?
Well, that's pretty easy for me, because when I came, I decided that I was really going to look into it and make sure that it was correct. And the things that happened to me, and what God did in my life, and the peace I had, and the relationship between Francine and I was better. And the Lord has taken care of us both mentally, spiritually, and financially. I mean, and when you pray, and prayers are answered, and the peace I have, and right now, I go out and give the keys to heaven to a lot of people that don't want them, but I'm passing them out. So,
Praise the Lord. How about you, Francine? How would you describe the difference?
That's such a difference. You know, being a Mormon, you have to do all these works, and when you go to the temple, you're married for time and eternity. And then you obey all the laws and ordinances of their gospel. And then you can become a god and goddess. And then when you're a god and goddess, you know, you're busy having spiritual babies and all that kind of thing that I was living with, thinking, this is what I'm going to do. And I think I've had 4 kids. I don't want to be pregnant forever. You know, I mean, really, that was, oh. But after I received the Lord, I'm not kidding, I had something in here, the Holy Spirit just filled up something that was missing. And I wanted to get up on the rooftop of my house and just announce it to everybody. You guys, you need to know this, you know. So I tried to tell a few people. That didn't work.
It didn't go over too well, did it?
At all.
Those crazy Dietrichs over there and believing in Jesus. And
oh, but it just, I don't know, it just filled me up. And just walking the Lord is just so beautiful and so wonderful. And I have a peace that I never had before. Yeah. It's just wonderful. Yeah. And I feel so sorry for those Mormon people, especially my children that don't know the Lord. You know, it just, I've tried witnessing. I even typed up a little testimony thing and gave it to them, and they in the garbage. Yeah. And, you know, it's hard, but I just pray a lot. You know, I don't try witnessing much anymore, because what do you do when people don't want to listen?
Right, you pray for them.
That's all I do is pray. Yeah. So I pray a lot.
Yeah. That's a good thing.
See, it took the fear away from me. I have no fear. And I was told the other day that I was probably the only guy that he'd ever met that could walk up to a perfect stranger and introduce myself. And
that's just his way anyway. He's very friendly.
Yes.
Yeah.
But there was a fear before.
Oh yes, I was a coward, because I was always looking up thinking I wasn't good enough. I wasn't good as the next guy up there, because I was a lowly elder, and I wanted to climb the ladder, but I could never get there, you know.
And to climb the ladder, these are kind of the hoops you got to jump through, and and tithing. I mean, you had done everything except the tithing. That's what held you back from progressing.
They never did. They never did talk to me after that.
Yeah.
But basically, I was kind of a, because I watched my friends go by me, and I felt bad because I really wanted to be a bishop. I thought I'd be a good bishop, and I wanted the glory, because the people that seemed to become the bishops, stuff like that, become all important, you know. And hello,
Yeah,
how
it's
are
quite
you?
a position, isn't it? Yeah. Now, you were sharing, you knew that as you were thinking about things, just the marriage in heaven and being a god and goddess of your own planet and procreating spiritual babies of your planet, and especially for your generation, that was quite clear to everybody that knew anything about Mormonism, right? Because in the modern generation, there's a playing down of that, or a seeking to move away from that reality. You'll speak to the younger generation of LDS people, and I'll say, well, eternal progression is the heart and soul of Mormonism, and that you are on an adventure to become a god and goddess. Oh no, we don't believe that. We don't. Usually I think it's sincere that they haven't really been taught that. Or did that transition happen while you were observing that, or is that really in the last 15 or 20 years that has kind of changed with at least their perspective for the,
I'm sure it's been, the last few years. See, we were married in 1958.
Right.
And back then, there's a lot of things that we had learned that they don't learn now.
Right. That were the obvious teachings of the church. This is what you're going to do, and be sealed for time and eternity. Be a god and goddess if you are faithful in tithing. I mean, the list of things. If you do those things, then you're going to ascend to that celestial, kingdom.
There's been a lot of changes made in that we've noticed and read about in the Mormon Church, and it's bothered me a little bit, because if Joseph Smith was a prophet, you should be following his line,
right,
and his scripture, because the Book of Mormon was supposed to be the most best and correct book ever written. And today you're seeing there's either Mormon doctrine or Mormon scripture. Which one do you follow?
Right, right. So I'm so glad that the Lord touched the two of you by His grace and rescued you and saved you. And so glad to be able to call you my friends for all these years, and seeing what the Lord's doing in your lives, the peace that you have, the joy that you have, the confidence you have in God's grace. So thanks for coming and sharing with us today.